Welcome to Junket Theory, folks. And today in the house we got Tara DeMarco, VFX Supervisor behind WandaVision and the Marvels, and Primetime Emmy Award nominee. Tara, thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me.
Uh, I absolutely enjoyed WandaVision and the Marvels. Anything with a ginger cat in there, I'll watch it, like I was telling you before. But before we come to all that, I want to know about your origin story. How did you become a VFX supervisor? How did you get into the business? Talk to me a bit about that.
Ooh, I went to fine art college for photography in Massachusetts, and I was training to be a photographer and realized how difficult it would be to be a fine art photographer or a fine artist in general. It
Hmm.
requires quite a lot of hustle, and I have a ton of admiration for people that can make a living in the arts. And in that time, I ended up getting computer jobs and paying for college with computer jobs. And as that transpired over time, I essentially discovered compositing. Compositing is just photography and computer and motion all mushed into one. It's about taking found elements and making them photoreal. And so it ended up blending over time where I started learning After Effects and learning Avid and learning different programs and interned to learn more about compositing and eventually rolled into being an artist. So I was an artist for a long, long time at a company called The Mill. I was a compositor and a supervisor for commercials. And then after 15 years at The Mill, I met a few friends that had been doing second supervising for Marvel and making all kinds of cool long form projects. And I realized I wanted to tell stories. So eventually, I made my way into Marvel at the beginning of streaming. It was a funny kismet time. I was never expecting to join as a supervisor. I thought I would be someone's assistant. But when streaming started, they needed people and they needed people with hustle. And it turns out that compositors who have done lots of commercials are humans with hustle. So that's how I ended up where I am.
Is that somewhat related to the very short deadlines that you have on commercials and also episodic television?
I think so. And I also think that both commercials and episodic television, you have to embrace what's real and in front of the camera and make smart decisions about what you can achieve in visual effects. You know, both things, well, the timelines are different and the timelines are considered. You work with your filmmakers to make good decisions about what can be CG or what can be a plates composite. I think that
Mhm.
all filmmakers in all formats want to get the best out of their visual effects. And so that requires judicious choosing of what to keep and what to replace or change.
I noticed in your portfolio of work that you worked on Pirates of the Caribbean.
Hmm.
To
So,
yeah, to
yeah.
date, Davy
Actually,
Jones.
so
That's kind of like
that was funny.
yeah.
Pirates of the Caribbean was finished in the 2000s. In the early 2000s,
Mm.
I was working at a company called Method that still makes lots of commercials and films. And I'm sure they work on episodic television as well. I think they did some work on Ms. Marvel. So Method Studios at the time were doing a few shots on Pirates of the Caribbean, and
Mhm.
we had a little team, and we were tasked with a few very specific kinds of sequences. And I think for that, I ended up taking a stunt plate of Johnny Depp on a big fake dreadlock and face replacing him onto a stunt performer on a big fake dreadlock for the sequence where there's like the good Jack Sparrow and the bad Jack Sparrow on his shoulders. And I worked
Yes.
on that
Okay.
one shot for maybe 6 weeks. It was a whole new experience moving
Six
from commercials.
weeks.
Yeah, one shot.
Goodness. But that kind of speaks volumes about what the VFX industry is, right? because you put so much work, so much time goes into like maybe like 10, 12 frames, I don't know. But
Yeah.
it just, when you're watching it, it just goes by in the blink of an eye. And people don't really know so much about. I mean, I think they're becoming more and more aware due to web series like VFX artists React. I think they're doing a really good job educating the general public on what it takes to create CGI characters, basically visual effects in general. But the awareness, although it has increased, I feel like people don't necessarily know the painstaking effort that you guys put in when it comes to creating the unimaginable.
I mean, that's kind of our job.
It is.
It's an invisible art that if we've done it really well and you can't tell what we've done, those are my
Mm,
favorite visual effects. I know that there's a lot of a storm in the visual effects media about different filmmakers disavowing the nature of the work in their films and saying that they didn't use CG or they didn't use too much visual effects or it was all practical. I personally have a love of that invisible work. I think
mm,
that if you have done seamless and beautiful work, the audience will never know. And it just enhances the story and allows you as an audience member to be with the character. Because you want to care about the characters. You don't necessarily want to be in awe of the CG wall that we made behind the character.
that's true.
I mean,
That's
one of the
true.
things in this the flow from photography to visual effects that's been interesting is in my visual effects supervision, I spend lots of time on set with our film crews. And a lot of our film crews are slowly learning what it takes to accomplish the visual effects tasks and are becoming more and more collaborative in terms of making sure we have the elements that we need in order to get our pieces together or giving us time to do the right amount of capture. And it's a thing that I enjoy doing is working with the film crew to help them understand what the pieces will become, how they will come together, the number of people that will have to touch those pieces in order to assemble the shot, and the amount of time it takes to make the CG asset or even to do a 2D stitch. I mean, all of that tracking and roto and paint and all of the tasks that lay the groundwork for greater CG, that's all time. And so, one of the things that I work with our filmmakers often is understanding the amount of time it will take to execute the shot that is just an idea. And it seems like magic. If you're not on the ground making those pieces yourself and putting them together yourself, you don't really understand the process. And I think it's hard to wrap your mind around how many people contribute to each visual effects shot or each sequence. So that's something I like to do. And I feel like our filmmakers appreciate understanding what all goes into the thing. Because to a lot of them, both the directors and the producers, but also the on-set crew, you sort of capture things, it goes into the camera and it goes into a black box. And 18 months later, you have a film that's finished. And that's part of the responsibility of the team that's on set is to just help get the message out. Like, these are people. These are
Yeah,
people spending their long days, same as every crew member on a set is spending their long days, potentially longer.
potentially longer. As a VFX supervisor, you talk about bridging the understanding between people who are actually working on the VFX versus people who are actually on set. How have you like so on your time working on projects like WandaVision and Marvels? Have you noticed it becoming any easier to communicate that, or do you work? I don't know if I'm framing the question correctly here.
I, I think I understand your question. And the thing about working for Marvel
Hmm.
that is wonderful is that the crew knows what goes into the post. Like, our film
Hmm.
crews are fantastic in understanding that there's really a lot that's going to happen once we've wrapped camera. And so they have been the most generous, thoughtful, collaborative film crews I have ever worked with. They get it. I think that when I film with other film crews that aren't used to such spectacles, that is becoming clearer that post needs a little bit more support and a little bit more consideration. And it's really just about communication ahead of time. Everybody's time on set and in post is precious. And if in our prep we're clear about the amount of time we need to complete our tasks, then those tasks get scheduled into the days, and then no one's upset because it's not a surprise that we need 30 minutes to scan a set at the end of the day with the lights on, or 5 minutes at the end of a setup to capture reference plates. And, for every CG goose in the Marvels, we filmed an in camera cat. So we had a standby goose that was there, whether we thought it was going to be a crazy CG action or not, just because we wanted our visual effects artist to have the best possible cat reference. But so the cat pass, as it came to be known, took time. We had an amazing cat, and we would bring in what we called kitty cat greens. And so we would wrap the actors, move the actors out, pull in kitty cat greens, walk the goose and the trainer in, roll, balls and charts, and then get everybody out of there. But we allowed for that time in our day, and so then it wasn't problematic for anyone on the crew. They expected it, and they respected the process, and that was amazing.
That's cool to hear. I mean, like working with animals, and then you have this flick and looks like a cat but isn't. And to make it as believable as they were, because like there are certain shots you don't think this is okay. You have the flick and swallowing people up. That's CG, but then there are certain other shots which you don't think are CG, which you look at the CGI breakdown, and it turns out that the cat entirely was constructed from scratch. It's just amazing. I was like mind blown. Like, did you guys actually have to recreate the cat? But then, I get it. Under logistical circumstances, it might
I
have been like
mean,
the most prudent way to go ahead with it, right?
yeah, let's talk about the cat for a second. So there's a few
Mm.
interesting things to think about in terms of filmmaking and the cat. One of them is that we had some actor allergies. So that required a few CG
I
cats.
heard
And
about
then
that.
in addition to some allergies, and it's funny, one of the cats had an allergy. Uh, but in addition to the actor allergies, we did train the cat to do all kinds of crazy actions. Like we had an amazing cat trainer in the UK with our film crew, and they were able to get it to knock chess pieces over and to actually toggle the switch and to hop up and hop down, and it could do all these actions. But again, if you have a limited time in your filming day with your hero actor, you might want to work on those cat actions with a stunt performer or a double or someone who is patient enough to let you try again and again and again with the cat, maybe with a smaller crew and on another day. So some of our cat decisions were based on that, and some of them are based on what is the camera doing in the action that the human is doing. Can a cat comfortably sit in this wire rigged position that the camera, we're doing something crazy with the camera and something crazy with wires? Does the cat add an extra element? And then from shot to shot, if you're intercutting between CG cat and real cat, we went through the most real cat we possibly could. I mean, our cat vendors, Trickster and ILM, did a phenomenal job with their CG cat. So it was a goal of the filmmakers to never have any audience member be taken out of the film by the fact that it suddenly became a CG cat.
Mm.
It's one of the most important things that it's just like invisible effects, even though it's a really, really, really hard effect because the cats, everyone lives with cats. You have a ginger cat. I have a cat. You're going to know if it's wrong. You're going
Exactly.
to know if it's making some anthropomorphic look that it's not really, it doesn't make or it's not supposed to make. So it was a goal of the filmmakers. Nia wanted real looking cats, so we made real looking cats as often as we possibly could. I'm incredibly proud of our cats and love that they fooled people.
So definitely, like, I mean, this in the first movie it was just Goose, but in this you had how many cats did you guys have?
uh, okay, so we filmed 10 kittens,
Mm-hmm.
but we made 10 hero kittens 30 groom variations, and for whoever doesn't know, a groom is just the description of the fur and how the
Hmm.
fur sits on the CG character. They actually call the CG hair on our heroes grooms as well, which is pretty funny. Um,
GROOM?
GROOM.
Gotcha.
So the groom is just changing the color or the texture or the nature of the fur on really any character that has fur or hair. But so
Right.
from our 10 base cat models, we did 30 fur patterns. And in the biggest shot, there were 104 CG cats. We originally planned for 30 and we put 30 in, and then our director was like, more. So we put more in. The director was like, more. I mean, it was only wonderful. Like, yes, it was much more than originally planned, but it the to great effect.
If I was sitting behind on the director's chair, I would have asked for the same. more, more footballs.
More, more, more.
And you definitely got to give me the number of the cat trainer because my ginger cat could definitely use some.
They used clickers and
Clickers.
chicken on a stick. Maybe
Mm,
that'll be part of some featured before and after. But these cat trainers were remarkable. I was incredibly impressed.
nice. Going back to WandaVision,
Mm.
you guys are paying homage to quite a few sitcoms, and you shot quite a them. I think like maybe three of them in black and white.
Hmm.
And what were the technical challenges, dealing with that? Because you have Vision, who is an entirely well, an android character, but you got visual effects in there. And looking at behind the scenes pictures, he's not in his signature purple color. And talk to me a little bit about that and all the other visual effects. Try to keep it in line with the era in which these episodes are referring to uh, the the certain shows that they're paying homage to, versus how you guys managed to keep up visual effects on that.
It was really important to Matt Shackman, our director, and the studio to stay as era
Specific
specific
as
as
yeah.
possible, but really to honor the eras.
Hmm.
So we allowed for testing ahead of filming to test our lenses. I mean, we always do camera tests and costume tests and little bits of set pieces. Like everybody on the crew wants to know what their work is going to look like when we finally get to that first day when we're filming. But we knew that we would probably have to change the look of Vision. So that was one of the first things that we tested. We worked with our DP, Jess Hall. He was incredible and collaborative, and we did 2 days of makeup tests. We tested 5 colors. So ahead of filming, and even before we got to Atlanta, where we filmed, we took original footage from the films and went to a color suite and
Mhm.
played with that sort of purple red color that he ends up being. And we pushed it around a bit and quickly realized that it would break. Red goes really dark in a black and white color grade,
Yeah.
and the old timey actresses would use blue lipstick to fake red on camera. So we knew that. And so knew we had to do blue tests. So we did tests in the computer before we did paint tests on his skin. Really, the trick with Vision, and actually we used his stand-in. We used one of Paul Bettany's doubles to do all those makeup tests. So we ran it through the full CG pipeline. We brought on
Hmm.
a vendor. We changed the CG to sit on John's face rather than Paul's. And so we did a lot of work to figure out what it should look like. One of the things that Vision has when he's traditional is super shiny skin.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you then put shiny metal on his head, it looks slightly weird. So we ended up playing with hue, sheen, texture, like amount of light, texture on the metal panels. We really dialed into a bunch of different variables to try to find that sweet spot. We did capture in color and do the black and white treatment in post, but we committed in that we were shooting with lenses that could only do that 4:3 aspect ratio, the square. That it wasn't possible to punch in on those, and we committed to a grain look and a particular black and white treatment. So even though it wasn't black and white from the get-go, we knew it had to go that way. And then I don't know if you could tell, but we did a subtly different black and white between the 50s and the 60s. So the homage to the 50s shows and the 60s shows is that 60s got a little moodier. There's a little more contrast. Um, and it allowed you to go nicely into that crazy 70s. And then he's even a slightly different color in the 70s, leaning into the 70s vibe all the way. He's got a little bit more purple before we landed with that final color.
Nice.
Is that
So
too
it's
much?
all
There's
no.
a lot. There was a lot of testing that went into Vision. Same with the final Vision, the Vision,
Hmm.
the Android. It's hue. How much base purple versus base blue is the chalky white to white? He's kind of opalescent. I mean, it's actually
Yeah.
really funny thing with the characters that have skin sheen is that as humans who watch these films, we love seeing the little bit of shine that comes from the makeup that we're also used to seeing. So when Gamora has her color, or any of the Guardians that have their skin colors, really only Drax has a matte finish to him. A
True.
lot of the actors have this really shiny finish that comes from that special effects makeup. And it's one of the things that we actually pushed into Beast was a little bit of shine when we, because he's a fully CG character, we could have
Hmm.
given him our skin texture, which is kind of matte. And when
Yeah.
we did that, he looked weird. So we ended
Hmm.
up pushing a little bit of shine into him and using the Vision shine as reference, because somehow through film and our love of film and watching these films with these characters with practical makeup, you kind of want that shiny vibe
Yeah.
on other skin tones. Otherwise, you don't quite believe it. It's a funny thing to replicate.
That, that makes sense, right? I mean, like, I guess like a lot of the time you guys are pretty much eyeballing something to see if it actually works psychologically, because we are so used to seeing so much quote unquote content with humans in there, ever since the day we are born, and we kind of subconsciously can have this gauge to measure whether something really feels real or not. And as as a VFX supervisor and pretty much anyone in the VFX industry, I think it's about matching the audience's expectations with what you're creating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you will have a gut instinct. Like I'll have an instinct and you'll have an instinct. And
Yeah.
often in our reviews, we sit with our producers and our director and our picture editors, and I know that it might sound terrifying to some filmmakers to have such a committee, but it is nice when you're making something completely new to have like a gut reaction from a group of filmmakers that's familiar with the material, just to
Mm,
see if it feels right, because we're creating really strange things. And a lot of the way to ground those strange things is in what's familiar. Something has to be familiar, or else the audience might not react well. I mean, you want to engage. You don't want an uncanny valley. So you got to have something there that you can latch onto and really feel a connection with. And if there's a hint of familiarity in the design, it helps.
how often do you go back and forth with changes in the sense before you finally lock down on something? And
Often,
okay, okay, okay. I'm not gonna go into numbers, but how do you
uh,
manage to kind of lock it down? Because something that we were talking about earlier is the fact that when you are creating something, you don't necessarily get to one thing enjoy it as much as a fan does. And personally, I feel like secondly, also you kind of become snowblind to it too. I guess.
yeah.
I mean, this is
I mean,
something.
so that again, so
Mm,
this is a part of, you're getting into the secret sauce. So one of the things that we do in our VFX shoot prep
mhm.
and in our script breakdowns is one of the first things I look for is what's weird. Like, what's the weirdest thing in this script? Is it a giant
Mhm.
red wall called a hex? Is it a planet that we've never seen? Oh, that's no a hole in the sky. A glitching. What like what's weird? Because
Mhm.
that's the thing that will likely take the longest. Hopefully,
Right.
will take the longest to sort of creatively land. Sometimes you're lucky, and we
Mhm.
stumble upon something quickly, and we love it. But you know, in long form filmmaking, there's often a visual development process where they work on keyframes ahead of visual effects starting. So
Yeah.
Marvel have the viz dev with Andy Park, who is the viz dev artist on both of the projects that I worked on. So we come with some ideas, and those ideas have been worked on with the studio and the director. And then from there, you begin concept and you concept and concept and concept until you find something that begins to feel right. You find a frame or a palette that resonates with your director. And then from there, you might move into a motion test or a film test. I mean, starting early with the weird things is the way it gives you enough runway to have that iteration,
Mhm.
and then working again, making good choices, working with your filmmaker to decide, okay, what things can we settle on early so that we can just execute those so that our clever people of brainstorming iteration can focus their
Yeah.
energies on the things we don't know. You want to, in your script breakdown in early days, move things into categories of straightforward execution. Okay, does our sky look like a sky on Earth? Great. Which sky? Okay, a blue one? Great. We're going to put blue skies there. But then what's weird goes into another category of development and exploration. And hopefully you might you might get a really solid steer from your filmmaker, or they might say, I'm not sure, show me some options. And then you go wild with a mood board. You start from a really broad strokes place.
How early on do you attach yourself to the project?
As early as they can get me. I started the Marvels with Mia in November of 2020, and we began filming in July of 2021.
Okay, so that was like
So
roughly what, 7 months
seven or
of
eight months.
pre-production. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Mhm.
do 4-ish months of prep in the location with the film crew and the ADs, and then hopefully you're on earlier just for planning and exactly what we were just talking about. Working
Gotcha.
with the director ahead of traveling to a location, or even if you're filming locally, just to figure out a game plan for what seems like straightforward work and what needs a bigger plan. And actually, that's something that I don't know if we'd planned on talking about, but the volume work requires a
Mm.
significant amount of pre planning. So that's another thing to think about and talk about. And the first conversations we had with Nia once we had a script were, do you want to do any of this work in a capture volume? And
Yeah.
if so, which sequences? And that from there, because that visual effects work has to be done up front. So
True.
that
True.
work takes 12 to 14 weeks ahead of filming. So either it gets stacked for the back end of your film schedule and you're executing your VFX the whole time you're filming, or hopefully you've begun in prep. Same process, concepting, storyboarding, all of that just ahead of time. So any of the shows and films that want to use that technology have to start even earlier.
Wow. I mean, I've heard that Marvel definitely starts, visual effects work quite a while before the film actually, you guys start rolling cameras. But talking about the volume, that's an entirely different beast, isn't it? Because you need something that's like final in order to shoot it as well. Like
I
you
mean,
don't really have time until the deadline, till the release.
agreed. I would say that there are a few flavors of that work. for any of
How so?
your viewers who haven't
Hmm.
seen. There's a great couple of podcasts and videos out there about how the Batman did their rain
Hmm.
scene, their rain and fire driving scene, that shows great volume work with kind of like flame bars and just
Hmm.
interactive on the car. So the Batman did it in an interesting way. They had some for interactive and some for final pixel, which is that fully realized, fully rendered, planned ahead of time. Um, and I think that I would direct you to our before and afters, but because of our visual effects embargo, none of them are out in the world, which is why I'm suggesting looking at the ones from the Batman. I think they're great, and I think they did an excellent job of their volume work on a stage planned for the cityscapes that they had to make
Yeah.
ahead of time, and then also knowing what was interactive only. For the Marvels, we did something similar. We knew ahead of time what would just be for interactive lighting on the cast, and then what we wanted to have finished and
Hmm.
planned for it. And some of what you decide to be interactive only is based on the amount of time you have left. Like, you may want to have an in-camera volume asset or an in-camera environment, but if you don't have enough time to execute it, you're just going to have to do it after the fact anyway.
Hmm.
So that's one of those things to discuss with your filmmakers up front. How much time do you have? Can these decisions be made? Are we going to be happy with how far we get in the time we have? You know, there's no way to rush some visual effects. They just take time to bake. Um, I've worked, at Marvel with Victoria Alonso quite a lot, and one of her favorite sayings was, "You can't make a baby with 9 women in 1 month." So that is true of many things in visual effects, and sometimes adding more people doesn't actually get you all the way to the place. You just need the time.
Definitely stealing that. That's a damn good analogy.
It's a great analogy. Like, you can add people and resources and time up to a point, and you can assign different tasks to different humans, but at a certain point, if you have craft, that just takes time, and you need to let the person have the time to make the thing that they're good at making.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, work. There's this final shot. I'm working on my current, my final shot movie, and there's this one shot that has been quite a bitch. Excuse my French. To kind of, get it locked, and I realize, okay, I know how much of a duration it's gonna be, so I'll just lock the edit, send it off for grading, scoring, all of that, and just give the VFX artist the time that he needs to complete it. I guess that's the only way to go ahead with
I mean, that's a smart way to do it.
it.
That last 10% takes the longest time. And if
True.
you rush the last 10%, then it looks a little undercooked and everyone's sad.
Yeah, and the thing is, it is gonna live on long after you guys, you do. So might as well put the best
Hopefully.
thing out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true of it's no secret all visual effects people would like to polish for as long as they
Hmm.
possibly can. And so it's really a, a tough call when you decide that something is done, but something is done. Actually, uh, I can't do this in my current job and with our long form projects. It's too hard and there's too much going on. But in my commercials compositing days, I worked at this great company where we had a bunch of really talented compositors. And if I had worked on something where I was slightly cross-eyed and I couldn't tell if it was perfect or not, I would call someone else in the room and say, "What did I do?" And if they couldn't say, then it was done. And I would walk away. So, particularly with weird things like changing lip motions or fixing eye lines, that stuff always looks weird, particularly if you know what the original lip motion was, what the original eye line was. That's actually when you want to use your friends, phone a friend, and say, "How does this look to you? Did we do anything?" And if they pointed out the background, then you're good.
Talk to me about eye lines because I had a script supervisor on the show once before, and he really, really drove the point in saying that yeah, when you are working with CGI, eye line is like it's paramount to get it right.
I agree. I would say that it's true in all parts of filmmaking. I think that eye lines are huge. I mean, they're established in your cut and in your
Yeah,
filmmaking, and that hopefully your CGI lines are just matching into what you've captured for real.
yeah. I mean, like sometimes the actors are just playing off of like a tennis ball or something. So
It's hard. I mean,
yeah,
we tried for the Marvels, we did some AR tool tasks where we set eye lines and let them know what they'd be responding to. I honestly think sometimes having like a little maquette or something that they can look at works. But sometimes you place it where it should be and at the correct height and it still looks weird, and then you're with the gut of your script supervisor and your DP and your director to maybe adjust down or left or right. And I I defer to those good people.
goes to show how collaborative filmmaking can be in all stages. I mean, when you don't really know what to do, you just defer to somebody else and hope that their skill saves the day.
I mean, we all need a little help in making a decision from time to
Yeah.
time. I know that there are auteurs who have a vision and that you follow their vision all the way through. And as a supervisor, I try really hard to put on the hat of both my director and my DP because
Mm.
we're making shots in CG with cameras that they haven't necessarily planned. Even if we're designing them in previs, they'll of course weigh in, but that's a CG camera that we're placing in a CG space. And so, one of the jobs of visual effects, I think, is to just embrace and embody the style of the filmmakers that you're working with and hope that they embrace that collaboration as well. That we would show them and get feedback and try to follow their example because you
Yeah.
don't want your CG cameras or your visual effects created shots to not be within the language of the film.
How often? So, when it comes to shots that are entirely CGI, which in the Marvel universe you have quite a lot of those. How
Yeah.
often do you get the cinematographer involved as well to kind of, I guess, guide cinematography, or is it something that's entirely done by the the CG artists?
Oh, well, we designed some shots ahead of filming in prep,
Hmm.
and we try to previs a fair amount of the work in prep. And in those sessions, if the director is happy to have the DP join, then they do. We had Jess Hall join for previous sessions for WandaVision, and we had Sean Bobbitt sit in with us for previs for the Marvels. So
Right.
we were able to work with them with the third floor directly in collaborative sessions where we set cameras and lenses and frame positions, and we'll do that as much as we possibly can ahead of filming. Once we have wrapped, then the DP isn't necessarily involved, but your director is, and your director is ultimately the one who's choosing those lenses and those moves, even if it's a collaboration with their DP. So all CG shots that are created, we work with the director. InViz will often work with a couple of frames, a couple of lenses, and give some
Hmm.
options. With third floor, we did a fair amount of live sessions with our director Nia, where they would preset the scene, and then we'd have lenses ready and rigs ready, and then we'd be able to move the camera around and place it, and be able to block the move with her, and then we would refine it on our own and present, and then she ultimately would choose.
So, is this in some way related, or does it become tech whiz at some point?
Sometimes
Hmm.
Sometimes it just stays previs and it goes from previs directly to finishing. It'll go
Gotcha.
from the previs all the way to the vendor that's finishing the shot. Sometimes, if it requires putting our actors in as little elements, or if we
Hmm.
think that we want to get a part of the set or a part of the move for real, then yes, it will become tech viz. So we'll essentially, from the previs, go again back to the film crew, ask them, what crane are you using? What body are you using? Where is the base going to sit? Is there anything else it has to interact with? And we'll try to get as many of those real world physical structures into that previs space so that we can provide heights and tilts and essentially get it there or thereabouts for the film crew, so that on the day we're filming that scene, they have a roadmap to start from.
Yeah, that's such an interesting aspect of it that, I mean, I came across it quite recently too. That you go ahead, you plan the exact values, the distance, height, tilt, all of that, like you said, well ahead before you go in, on set and start shooting. It's crazy. And all that you told me, it's a lot. It's a lot of information, which is great. But I keep wondering, how often must you be, getting frustrated with so much information, having to look into so many sides of it? Like, how often do you encounter creative frustrations throughout the process?
That's the job.
Talk
You
to me about
know,
how you solve them in that case.
I mean, creative puzzles are the job of visual
Hmm.
effects supervisors. That's our whole job. That's why we're here. We're here to help. We're here to work with our filmmakers and help brainstorm ideas and come up with solutions, and then protect the finishing time so that we get to make a beautiful thing. Honestly, the most frustrating thing in my role, and I would say for most visual effects teams,
Hmm.
particularly the vendor teams, but also the onset teams, is when we don't have enough time to
Hmm.
either capture what we need on set or to capture what we need in terms of finishing, like have enough time to finish the shots, or have enough time to prep effectively to be an efficient team to get those assets on the day. The way to protect that is through thorough communication and hopefully a good collaboration with your film crew and your filmmakers, so that they'll give you enough time to prepare.
Hmm.
I mean, the major frustration comes when we're rushed. And if I'm forced to rush or I'm asked other people to rush, I will often just make it clear that that is a suboptimal way to work and that it might not come out how we want. And that's a choice we're all going to have to make together. There's another phrase that we've used a fair amount in filmmaking, and that's we're going to have to hold hands and jump. So if we're rushing, we're agreeing to rush. Like, okay, you want it when? Okay, well, you might not get a revision. It might not look how we want. It might not be what we want. But if we have to rush, we'll rush and we'll see where we go. And
Hmm.
and if you want something very specific, then let's find a way to make the time. Let's change the location. Let's move the shooting schedule around. And this is where that communication is paramount, where we have to constantly check in with our AD team and our director and our producers and say, hey, we have a concern from a visual effects standpoint that we're not going to be prepared with what you might need to execute this sequence. The previs isn't there. We had a new idea. We added a character. We removed a character. Who knows? The location changed. Oh my goodness, we lost the location. Oh, we have to change the viz to be based on the new location. Uh-oh. How many days is that going to take to execute the new viz? Do you absolutely have to have it to film? So I personally don't often get frustrated because I try to be very clear with what the expectations are and what can be achieved in the time we're given. So, unfortunately, my filmmakers on both WandaVision and the Marvels have been massively receptive to that kind of communication loop. Like, we all just share and make sure we're honest and we're open and we're trying, and if we're honest and open and trying, then they will try for us, and then hopefully we'll either get more time or rein in our idea or hold hands and jump.
That answers my question. um, the Yeah, this is with regards to the final question that I actually had on the email. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
any transferable skills from different walks of life that have kind of helped you in your role as a VFX supervisor?
Cat owner. Cat owner. Yeah. the transferable skills, photography skills.
Hmm.
I know I went quickly from photography into visual effects, but I am still a hobby photographer and I love film and cameras and lenses. And I think having a sympathetic eye to light and lighting and where it's coming from and paying
Mm.
attention to where the light is coming from and how it's affecting the characters is definitely a sympathetic skill. I think that having those communication skills is paramount. If I am an incredibly technical person but I can't explain what it is we're trying to achieve in the day, or work with a crew to get the elements we need, then that doesn't help me. And this might sound slightly unexpected, but physical skills are incredibly important. um, any sport, yoga,
Mm.
running, whatever, is going to help with the physicality of the characters and their actions that you're recreating in CG, and often will help when you're working with your stunt teams,
Hmm.
because you know these two projects I've worked on have been filled with superheroes that have to take off and land and make contact, and being mindful in your own physicality is helpful in translating that physicality to sort of fantastical actions, because you want to see a hard hit and you want to see them land and really be on the ground, and even with the kittens, you want to have them hold kitten weight. Just being aware and familiar of those physical things around you, I think helps make better visual effects, because it's that little gem, that nugget of realism that allows you to latch on to believing that that thing is there, so that the rest of it could be crazy.
Essentially, being a really good observer.
Hopefully.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, your initial answer being a cat owner counts as well because you gotta be really patient with them cats, man, and
Visual
you gotta
effects, film crews, herding cats.
totally. Before we close,
Mm.
what next? What's up
Oh,
next?
don't
And
know.
oh, you're under NDA. You cannot let us know anything.
No, no, I genuinely don't know. I
Uh-huh.
mean, the next Marvel things have all been announced. Those teams are going. We'll see. We'll see what the future holds. To be
What
determined.
would what would you like to work on besides Marvel? What other franchise or potential movie would you TV show would you like to work on?
I mean, I'm personally very interested in action films.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I'd love to do a James Bond. Like,
Mm.
I'm very interested in that sort of Sam Mendes, like, really physical, stunty, cinematic version of James Bond. Um, I My husband would love it if there were to be another John Wick.
They are
He's a
making
John.
one.
Maybe. I mean,
That's what
Janelle
I've
did the
heard.
last one and she did an amazing job, so I hope she's on the next one as well. Janelle Grosharala is another fantastic lady supervisor. So, and I thoroughly enjoyed her John Wick work. Um, no, I think an action, like a regular action. I mean, heck, a Captain America someday. I think that Cap has great action. Who
I
knows?
love what they did in Winter Soldier.
Yeah, me too.
Really wish we could see more of that particular style.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Tara, this has been amazing and enlightening. I mean, visual effects is some. I mean, the technicality of it is quite a blind spot for me. So you enlightened me on quite a lot of things today. Thank you so much. And as always, great job with WandaVision and the Marvels. Love the kittens. Definitely went for
Me
that.
too.
And Samuel L. Jackson, of course. But
He's the best.
he is literally the best. Thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. And till next time, this is Junkyard Theory, folks.